The quilt means to me almost everything. I mean, it saved my life in many, many ways. I went to the Names Project too because I was angry. I couldn't talk about my friends who had died. And it was the first place that I walked into that it was okay to tell stories about somebody who had died, and that, and they felt the same pain I did. My first two panels, I thought that I was making them for my friends because my friend's lover had died, and I was making it for him. Then I realized I was making them for me, and I had kind of brought those guys back to life in some odd way. When I went to the first meeting in '87 down at the Women's Building on 16th Street, no, I thought I was going to go in there and I was going to bring my panels down and give them to them and maybe go to D.C. But I hadn't really even thought that far. I had two other jobs. I worked at Macy's and I worked in the union. And leaving them was one of the hardest things I ever did at the meeting. I remember my boyfriend picked me up and I jumped in the car and I started to freak out. I got to go back and get them. And he goes, "The kids will be okay. They're off to college now. They'll be okay." And that's how I felt. I had to be next to him again. And so, in fact, so much so I didn't even like when people looked at my panels because it was just such a personal thing. The quilt is more than just you're making a panel for somebody. It's really looking into you. If you go look at my panel, you're looking deep inside of me because that's what you're kind of putting on there. And so it's really, it's pretty emotional. And you have a real, you get possessive over them and stuff like that. The quilt is the quilt. It's the whole massive 60-ton piece of fabric. A single panel is what the quilt really is comprised of, are 50,000 single panels of 3 foot by 6 foot. Those are the panels that were made by loved ones, mothers, lovers, friends, that are sent in to us. And the way the quilt is assembled is that we have to pick 8 panels that go together and sewn together into a 12 by 12. The way that we pick those is I pick them. But there are some rules when they come in. Panel makers, if they send them in together, they want them to be together. That is the number one thing, and that doesn't matter what I think or anybody else thinks. They will be put together. Since 1987, I have touched or cared for or repaired every single 12 by 12 that is in the quilt. That's about 6,020 12 by 12s, which makes 50,000 panels. And I've seen the fronts and backs of them. I've sewn many, many together, but at some point they've gone through my hands. You don't have to be a seamstress to make a panel. Anybody can make one. And actually, in the beginning, not too many people knew how to sew. So anybody who wants to make one, if you have a loved one who's died, we welcome it. You can do anything you want with a panel. A panel is yours to create in any way you want. The only thing we ask is that it be 3 foot by 6 foot. That's the size of a grave, and that will fit into our configuration. And that it have the name or initials of somebody who's died of AIDS, or it can also have more than one person on it. We've tried to implement different rules throughout the years, and none of them were very successful. So those are the two that we try for. But I'm just going to go with the story from day one. I remember Cleve and I were up in the balcony, and we're looking over, and there's this guy doing a panel, and he's got this great big air conditioning vent slapped down in the middle of it. And Cleve goes, "Are you going to go down there, or should I go down there and tell him he can't do that?" And so, I'll do it. So I walk down and I start to tell him, because we won't be able to fold it. And he just went off on me and just went, "No, this is the grill. This is it." I kind of backed away from him, and we just went back up there and made us. One of the rules was that people could put anything they wanted on the panel, and we weren't going to say anything about it, because who am I to say, that wasn't the grill, So because we used to want, I know a lot of people. Well, that's not foldable or whatever. We got pony sticks on them. We have huge Gumbies, blow up Gumbies on some of them. I mean, I can't ashes, wedding rings, dildos. I mean, just everything you could possibly think of. And I really love it because it's we don't judge, no matter what we think about them. When Roy Cohn, a friend of mine, made that very first panel for Roy. He was a horrible man, but it says "bully, coward, victim" on it. And I kept saying, "Yeah, send it in." And everybody thought we wouldn't put it in, and we put it. We wanted it to go in because nobody deserved to die of AIDS, even him. The quilt began, it was made by gay men for gay men. I mean, it started in the Castro, and that's, who we went after it because we were activists. We didn't have time to go and, search out people. Then once it went to DC, I'd say it grew a bit, and when we came back and we went on that tour, we brought in a lot of mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers. There were groups that made panels, we'll say the Gay Men's Chorus, and then other different groups, hemophiliacs group. So it's made by anybody across the country. I mean, I would say more and more it's moms. We've had a lot more of that, and I think every day we get more and more parents that do it. In 1987, the quilt was to go to have its inaugural display in Washington, D.C. And the reason why we picked October 1987, well, first off, it was Cleve's birthday. Primarily, the march was going to be there. And so we knew there'd be 1 million people there, if not more. And it was the experience of my life. I will never forget it. It took 2 hours to actually unfold the whole thing because we did it slowly as those names were being read. And it was something I will never forget. It's really hard to explain. But I came back. I had seen the baby Jesus. That's the only way I could, when they say you've been born again. I came back. I quit all of my jobs and left everything. And my family thought I was crazy. They wanted, because I used to make really good money, and that's all I wanted was to be with the quilt. So it was changed the way I think about everything, I think. The way that we actually got the unfolding ceremony, when we went to D.C. in 1987, we had the grid, and then there was a 24 by 24 foot space that was, where they were supposed to be opened up into. Now, they were never supposed to leave the ground. We thought that they would be too heavy, so we were just going to open them up. And so the square was put into the square. Well, when I was one of the first unfolding teams, and we got out there, and everybody was off, and then I looked down and went, uh-oh. And somebody had turned them all to the triangle to the square, and I, oh my God, what are we going to do? We were the first team, and we just slowly unfolded it, and I said, okay, we're going to have to lift it up, and they lifted it up really high, and it kind of flew into the breeze, and then we put it down, and it was all by mistake. But the other 3 teams were watching us. Oh, okay, that's the way we'll do it, and it ended up becoming something that we took on and saying, yeah, this is how we do it, but it had nothing to do with us, and so, which I think is really beautiful. But the moment I knew that it was going to be my life's work was when I started on the tour. I got to go on the 1988 national tour across the country, 20 cities. Cleve had picked the 6 people that were going to go, and they picked me, and I said, well, even if you hadn't, I was going to follow you guys in a Volkswagen because there was no way that quilt was leaving this town without me. But Cleve was walking down the street. He goes, I don't know why I picked you 6. Maybe it's your total inability to perform any of the tasks I've assigned you, but I know you love the quilt. It was the experience of my life. I get real emotional when I talk about the quilt, but especially the moment of just being able to be on the road. There was just a power going down the street with that quilt behind you and bringing it to communities that really, really needed it. To see that there were so many people across the country that felt the same way that I did, I think it was just because you think you're all alone. We'd come driving in, and there'd be 300 people just hungry. I remember opening up the back of the truck, and they're just, what can we do? What can we do? And that they were hurting like I was hurting, and I connected with them because of that. I'll tell you, I can go across the country anywhere now, and there's a mommy that would do something for me because they had the same hurt and anger in them. I will love them forever because of that. So that's what I got out of the tour. In 1996, after we went to Washington, D.C., monetarily, we started to have some problems with the Names Project had some problems. We had been a success, but we had overspent a lot of things. And then the .com thing came in. And that was driving rents straight up. So we knew we had to move because they were tearing down all those places in front of. They wanted us out. So where would we go? We couldn't afford to rent in San Francisco, and even if we could afford it, we couldn't justify it. I mean, it was just so much money. So Julie Rhodes was on the board, and she's the only board member that took the time to look for a place for us to move to. She lived in Atlanta, and so she found a place in Atlanta. The decision to leave was the hardest and the easiest thing I've ever done. I knew that I would go with the quilt. I've known it from day one. I was voted on the first tour that I would be the one by my bloody fingers still holding on to it. So it was really hard to leave San Francisco, not because I was born here, not because my family's here, not because my friends here, but because of the memories of what this city did when it stood up against AIDS. The panel that's called The Last One. It's a black and white panel. This guy brought it in, he wanted to submit it, and we opened it up and it said The Last One, and we were just so touched by it and so taken by it that we asked the guy if we could hold on to it until the end and put it into The Last One. I did not think we'd be waiting this long, and we have it hanging up at the warehouse today. It always hangs there. That's why what we look at when we think about what we want to do. That's what I look at. That's what I'm aiming for, to be out of business, kind of. And I was hoping that there were some people would be around that I could sew it in with, but I just hope before I die that I can sew that one in and be done with it. I'm not sure that will happen, but